Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today I'm going to take a look at the Transformers 2 Series Gamer Edition 04 Voyager class Megatron. Let me know anything of this figure in the comment section down below. Is it a pickup or pass? Now let's take a look at the figure's packaging. So here we have the packaging. Starting at the very front, we have Transformers on the side. We have these 2 Series and Gamer Edition logos. At the bottom of the box, we have Megatron in white text with a white Decepticon symbol. We have 04 because this is the 4th figure, a part of the 2 Series Gamer Edition subline. We have a little game controller button done in silver and blue, and of course a really cool artwork shot. Megatron looking very menacing and scary. We have an open wood displaying the figure. In the packaging, we have the Transformers War for Cybertron video game logo at that top corner there. There's another one at the top of the box with that same game controller button done in silver and blue. And if we do turn to the side, of course, we have 2 Series down the side of the box with Voyager class in several different languages. We have a really cool close-up of Megatron's head and chest looking very menacing and scary. We have 04 and that same game controller button again. And of course, on the back of the box, the figure transforms in 22 steps. There's a product shot of him and his robot, his tank button, and of course displayed with his included backdrop. We also do have a brief bio saying Megatron launches a full-scale attack on the space station guarded by Starstream and his army. And of course, as for the final side, we have another really cool artwork shot of Megatron in a really kind of cool running action pose, and that is pretty much it for the packaging. So let's now get into the review. Now, before we take a look at Megatron's robot mode, I did want to quickly take a look at the included backdrop. This is the Secure the Station backdrop, so just quickly taking a look at it here, we actually have some really cool kind of falling over bridges, some explosions, some energon cubes, and some buildings. If we do look at the side flap here, we do have the 04 and that same game controller button with 2 Series down the side, done in black text. We also do have the Transformers War for Cybertron logo on that little platform there. We can put the figure. I'll show that off in just a sec. We do have Gamer Edition, Transformers, and of course that same game controller button. And since this is kind of a display and backdrop, you can grab Megatron and put on that on the little display base there. I think that overall looks really cool. That's pretty much it for the included backdrop. Let's now take a look at the details of Megatron's robot mode. Here we have Megatron in his robot mode. Let's take a look at the details, starting at the very top with the head sculpt. We have some really nice metallic purple for the main face, some red for the eyes, some gray for the main helmet section, and some black for the crest or the entire forehead section. If we do look at the shoulders, we do have a mismatched design, which is always really cool to see. We have a huge spike on this side and a bit more simplistic on the other side, mostly done in red with some really nice venting detailing and a bit of a kind of laser or a kind of huge cannon at the back of the shoulder, mostly coming to play later for the tank mode, but actually still looks pretty cool on the shoulder in this mode. If you do look at the form, pretty plain again, mostly done in gray, but there is a MechTech port or a port there to actually accommodate his huge accessory or cannon. So of course it'll look a bit more interesting once we actually apply the accessories. And if we do look at the other form, on the other side we have this huge kind of gauntlet here, kind of an armor piece with some really cool spikes or kind of blades, which is pretty cool, mostly done in gray and red with some gunmetal gray for the biceps and the hands. And if we do look at the chest here, actually looking really cool, tons of angles, really cool layers of panels. I do like this kind of dark energon illuminating a purple effect. They actually kind of did the same thing on Optimus, Bumblebee, and Cliffjumper. Even on Barricade, of course, they kind of varied on the color scheme and the color of that illuminating effect per figure or, of course, per faction. You know, Barricade, again, was more of a purple, but the Autobots were more of a reddish orange, but I do love this. This looks actually really cool. I think they probably should have done some more on the figure because they really only had a tiny bit on the chest, the crotch, and a little bit on the legs. Unfortunately, in the tank mode, it's really not that present or obvious, so maybe they could have put a few more areas like on the arms so it would be a bit more obvious in this mode and in the tank mode. You'll see a little bit later, of course, once it's actually transformed, but looks super cool on the chest. Do love that. Really nice kind of venting detailing with these arrows done in black with some really nice kind of matte black behind the Decepticon symbol, and that Decepticon symbol is done in purple with some more of that illuminating effect of the crotch with some really nice sculpt work there. And I do love these huge spikes sticking out the knees there with some more of that illuminated purple. And I do love these huge thrusters sticking forward up the side of the legs, and the feet are overall pretty plain, mostly done in gray. As for that side profile, overall pretty clean, really doesn't have a backpack, no kibble sticking out, no ugly panels or anything. And if we do look at the back of the figure itself, overall really clean. Again, no backpack, no hollow gaps, no kibble. A really well streamlined, detailed figure in my opinion. So now for articulation, definitely one of the main focal points people are talking about with this figure. I'll get to the legs and the problems in just a sec. We're actually going to start with the arms and the head. So of course the head can slightly look up and down, really cannot tilt to left or right, but it can look left or right. Of course the arms can move out and in, forward, forward and back. There is actually a double jointed elbow bend on both arms, which is really cool to see. He does not have a wrist rotation. That's mostly due to transformation. You actually do fold in the hands, which typically I will kind of put a pass for the deluxes, because most deluxes, of course, you do fold in the hands a part of their transformation for whatever mode it is or whatever figure it is. And I do kind of pass on the deluxes because their budget is lower, but we have seen before with the Voyagers that have a wrist rotation but also fold in their hands. So I definitely think it was highly possible for them to do both, you know, fold in the hand and have a wrist rotation, because we have seen it before. And this is a Voyager, so it really would have been nice if they were able to do that for this figure, but I think probably budget most likely got in the way. And if you are wondering, you know, because the arms are different molding and different appearance, you know, the mismatched design for the forearm and shoulders, the articulation is pretty much the same. It really does not vary per arm. I guess there is one slight added joint or hinge. You can kind of display this entire spike, you know, out and in, depending really just what you like to see. I typically kind of like to have it facing up. I think it looks better that way, but if we do move the arms out, of course, there is a full functioning waist rotation all the way around, completely unhindered. The legs can kick forward and kick back, and of course kick out to the side. There is rotation at the top of the knee. There is a knee bend, and that is definitely one of the main focal points people have been talking about. So if you don't know, there's this entire kind of piece of plastic back here that pretty much keeps the knee from bending, you know, to the typical range, like the 90-degree bend that we're used to seeing, like deluxes, Voyagers, and leaders. So interesting enough, that entire piece of plastic is not used in this mode or in the transformation. You might assume, oh, it's used for, like, you know, a tab and slot to actually tap some stuff together, like the sides of the tank or something. But no, it does not involve or actually affect the tank mode or this mode in any way. So I'm really confused as to why it's there, because, you know, it would probably save Hasbro a bit of money if they actually just never put that piece of plastic there. That being said, of course, it's a very small piece of plastic, so it probably didn't really cost them that much to put it there, but, you know, they made that piece of plastic, they sculpted it and purposely, you know, built it for this figure, but I'm kind of wondering why. I guess it could maybe come into play later for some future figures, maybe some, like, combining gimmick, I really do not know. Maybe we could actually ask Hasbro at any of their upcoming conventions, like maybe PulseCon, because occasionally, whenever they do those type of conventions, we can actually ask them, you know, questions in their Q&A. So maybe next Santa Comic-Con, because they did have a Q&A then, maybe we could ask them, hey, why are these pieces of plastic at the back of the legs? Because they pretty much completely limit the knee bend. That being said, there is a fix for it, but it does require pretty much essentially breaking the figure. If you are okay with modifying or breaking this figure, you can pretty much clip off those pieces just with like a little razor or like a knife or something and just cut those pieces off. I don't really like modifying or breaking my toys. I don't like doing it, so I'm going to keep it that way. Yes, it is kind of a, you know, disappointment. It does bother me, but definitely does not ruin the figure by any means. But again, if you are okay with breaking and modifying, by all means, go ahead. And again, there's rotation at the top of the knee, and there is an ankle pivots, but not really one you can use because it pretty much just barely moves in, and it does actually move out, but that's mostly due to transformation. So it slightly moves in for you to use, but not as much as I would like to see. And overall, that is pretty much it for articulation. Let me just quickly straighten him up. So yeah, the knee bend could be better, but, you know, as for the main areas, like the actual legs, you know, kicking forward and back, the rotation at the top of the leg, the actual arms, overall it's pretty good for a Voyager. And as far as tolerances go, actually really, really good on this figure. I do have a complaint as of this forearm here. So, you know, it's the typical gimmick with these Gamer Edition figures. You can actually, you know, remove the forearm and attach the cannon. This is really loose on my copy. The past Gamer Edition figures, Barricade, Bumblebee, Optimus, they have been much more secure and tight, and it's actually really well attached. So it would have been nice if this was a bit of a better, you know, fit and snug. I do know you could probably add a bit of floor polish and make it a bit more sticky, which, to be honest, I might actually end up doing, because quite a few times when I'm transforming it, this will just pop off, so it gets a bit annoying. But as for the, you know, core main joints, the arms, the legs are overall really, really tight. As for accessories, he does come with two, one being this kind of simple forearm blasters. So this is another part of this figure that's been kind of a main focal point or talk point for Transformers fans. Is it is rather simplistic. If you do compare this huge cannon here to the figure itself, you know, this figure, tons of details, the really cool illuminating purple, the spikes, the details, the layers. It just seems a bit rather boring and plain to me. That being said, it has been a while since I played the War and Fall for Cybertron video games, but I'm pretty sure from what I can remember, this does not look like how it does in the video game. And a lot of people have actually been comparing this cannon to the past figure of the War for Cybertron Megatron, when the game first released. That being said, I do not have that figure, so I really won't be able to compare and give my thoughts on which figure is better or worse. I've actually seen it before in hand. A few of my friends used to own it, so it's been a while since I've seen it, but that cannon looked so much better. I do have a small opinion. Something I do like about this version of the cannon rather than the past one is, I think the size is better. I do think the past cannon was too big. It was almost like the same length and size of the arm. It was too huge in the proportions and the size. So I do think the size is better, but the details were far superior with that past release. So definitely this should have been a lot more details, like maybe some of that illuminating purple, some gunmetal gray, some silver. I do like the glossy black, on its own. It's a cool cannon. I think this would probably be a good cannon for like a G1 Megatron. Like if they wanted to make a G1 Megatron, this would be perfect. But this is a, Cybertronian based War for Cybertron Megatron, so definitely does not suit this figure, but it can store in pretty much two different ways. There is the port on the forearm, but you can also, of course, do that same gimmick where you remove the forearm, and you can actually attach it to here. It looks really bad in my opinion, but I will show it anyway, so you can use that, post and port system that you do the same, with the other Gamer Edition figures. So you can do this. I think it looks really weird, so I'm probably never going to use this feature ever again. But it's an option if you want to. But you can just attach it onto the side there like that. And I think that looks pretty cool. I do have somewhat of a theory, like maybe they were trying to do somewhat of a merge of like the G1 Megatron and the War for Cybertron Megatron. Because, as I said, this definitely looks like a G1 Megatron cannon. Because if you've looked pretty much at any figure of G1 Megatron, typically his form cannon is quite simple. Like the Earthrise Megatron, the Siege Megatron, typically they're just really like a black cannon, like a black barrel, and that's it. And that was, fine for a G1 Megatron. So maybe they were just trying to do like a G1 reference, or they could have just ran out of money. Maybe I'm looking too much into it. I really don't know. But as for his final accessory, it's actually this really cool battle mace thing, which looks so cool. If you don't know, if you might know, but I just love melee weapons. Whenever Hasbro does them, they typically do them right. And I have to say the same thing for this here. It looks so cool. This is probably one of my main things I was looking forward to when they first revealed this figure. That being said, it probably could have used a bit more paint apps, a bit more details, kind of like Optimus's axe. It was really nicely sculpted. Same thing with this, but probably could have used a bit more paint. And I think they could have done that some sort of like illuminating effect, like maybe they could have done it like on the inside here, like, or on like the pole or handle itself. That would have been really cool. I do have a complaint as of how he holds it. So you can of course use this entire post here and use the port in his hand, which is fine. It's actually just the figure kind of holding it at the ends, but it would have been nice if the figure could actually hold this mace like they did with Optimus Prime's axe. So Optimus Prime's axe actually split into 3 separate pieces, the blade, and there was actually 2 handle pieces, and you could actually have Optimus hold it pretty much in the middle of the entire handle or pole. And it would have been nice if they did the same thing for this, because it does look a bit silly to me. I'm holding it at the very ends. You might like how this looks. It looks a bit weird to me. It's also a bit odd because if you don't know, this is actually 2 separate pieces. There's the spike ball piece and the handle piece. So all they really needed to do, because this is already removable, they just really needed to add an area where you can actually put the hand in between these 2 pieces. And I think that would look a little bit better. Or they could have just had this entire thing sculpted to where, of course, you could really have the hand slid further up or further down, really depending how you like it. So maybe a bit of a missed opportunity. That really is a very minor complaint, really just specific to me. Most people might actually like how this looks. Me personally, I probably prefer how they did with Optimus Prime's axe over this. That's just my opinion anyway, but you can store in his hand, or you can actually store on the back. I'm not really sure if this is the official Hasbro way. I'm not really sure if they purposely put this post and port there, but I discovered it recently, and I'm actually really glad they did this. You can store it on his back, which is pretty cool. And I actually give a lot of props to Hasbro if they purposely did this, because that was actually one of my main complaints with the Gamer Edition Optimus. It's a really good figure, but it would have been nice if you could have stored his axe on the figure's back, but you can't. So I'm really glad they did with this. And again, more kind of props to this figure because it's a huge weapon. So it's pretty hard to store, anywhere in the figure without it looking ridiculous rather than his hands. So I'm actually really glad you can store it in its back and you can actually kind of angle it out, to kind of have it peeking through there. And I think that looks really, really cool. But that is it for accessories. The axe, or kind of the mace weapon, an amazing accessory. The blaster or the forearm cannon definitely could have been better. But let's now get down to a few quick comparisons. Here he is with the Deluxe Class Gamer Edition Bumblebee. And the Cliff Jumper review is coming very soon on the channel. So make sure you stay tuned for that. Here's with Bumblebee. And for a Decepticon comparison, here he is with Barricade, and hopefully he does not fall over. If you have this figure, you know this figure falls over quite a bit. But they do look really cool side by side. You know, I do think Barricade probably left a bad taste in quite a few Transformers collectors' mouths because it's not the greatest figure. Appearance-wise, it's a really awesome looking Decepticon. It looks exactly how Barricade should look. It's very accurate to the video game, but when you actually, you know, get deep into the figure, the articulation, the transformation, not so good. You know, as a display piece, you know, just putting on a shelf, it looks pretty cool, but when you get deep into the figure, not so much. So I do think this is a huge improvement Decepticon-wise, you know, a much better Decepticon figure. This is exactly what I like to expect when thinking of a Megatron and a Decepticon figure. That being said, I do think the Decepticons still do need a win, you know, because the Autobots so far are definitely winning. You know, Bumblebee, he's a really solid deluxe. Cliffjumper, of course, he's a repaint retool. You kind of know what to expect there. Optimus, he is my favorite figure of the Gamer Edition collection, or subline series so far. So hopefully our next Decepticon can be, you know, that same level of Optimus. He can just be excellent. Megatron is good, but I just think he falls slightly short because the articulation and the accessories, and the tank mode isn't the greatest. I'll get to more of what I think in the tank a little bit later in the review. So hopefully they can make like a Starscream or a Soundwave and just have him be that, you know, Voyager class Optimus tier, or maybe even better. We need to have a Decepticon a win. I don't want to discourage you from getting Megatron. He is a good figure. Just looking in the grand scheme of the, you know, Gamer Edition subline series, we do need to have a Decepticon win. That's just my opinion. But moving Barricade off to the side for one final comparison, here he is with Optimus, and I think they look absolutely awesome next to each other. I'm actually really glad we got these figures so early, because typically with other, you know, series and waves, you know, from Titan's Return to Power of the Primes, all those old ones, I typically remember them doing the main characters, you know, like Optimus and Megatron, they usually spread them apart really far. Like, we'd have to wait like an entire year to get Optimus, and then of course we'd have to wait another like year to get Megatron. So I'm actually really glad how soon we got these figures. You know, if they wanted to, maybe they could have waited a little bit longer and added a few more details to Megatron. I would have been fine with. I think Optimus turned out really good. I do have a few minor complaints, but I think he's definitely my favorite of the Gamer Edition subline series so far. That is just my opinion anyway. I think they look really cool side by side. I do unfortunately have another problem with Megatron. If you don't remember, I actually think I did do like a news video just before the figure came out, like a couple weeks back, when we actually had our first kind of in-hand look of Megatron and Cliffjumper. The Hasbro team did a live stream, you know, where they revealed some new figures like Brawn, I think a few new Legacy figures. I think the pipeline revealed Legacy Evolution Wave 4. And also at the very end, they kind of showed off Cliffjumper and Megatron like in hand, you know. They'd already been up for pre-order by then. They were just kind of like, hey, in case you were wondering, this is what it looks like in hand. I do remember saying in that news video, Megatron looks rather small, and I still do think he looks rather small. I was really hoping he was going to turn out bigger. I do think he is a Voyager, but definitely on the smaller side. You know, we kind of say that for leaders these days. There's kind of the top end of the leaders where they're bigger, like Armada, you know, Megatron from Legacy Evolution Wave 3, and then there's the smaller end where it's like Earthrise Optimus. You know, they call him a leader, but he's pretty much a Voyager. So it would have been nice if Megatron here was bigger, because if you do look at pretty much any appearance of Optimus and Megatron from the movies to the TV shows, Megatron is usually bigger. And here, I would say they're pretty much either the same size or Optimus is taller. So I think he should have been bigger. Also, I've actually heard quite a few people say he should have been beefier, because if you do look at Optimus, his, you know, his arms, his legs, his chest, he is quite big and bulky. That being said, people have actually complained about the proportions. His head is too small, but that's kind of how they looked in the video game. From the last time I played it, I remember, you know, the proportions really didn't make sense, but that was kind of on purpose. They were supposed to be very, you know, big and bulky and battle ready. So I do think they probably should have done the same treatment on Megatron here. His forearms, his shoulders, his chest, his legs should have been a bit more, you know, bulky and beefy, because he does seem rather thin compared to Optimus. You might not be seeing that. I just kind of see it that way. Whenever I put them side by side, it just seems he's a bit kind of too small, but on his own, he's a good figure. Just if you do, again, have Optimus and Megatron side by side, he does look rather puny, in my opinion, but they do look overall really good. Probably my two favorite Gamer Edition figures right here. I highly recommend them. But that is pretty much it for Megatron's robot mode. Let's now get down to transformation. Now for transformation, what you're going to do is fold this little flap on the shoulder, then you're actually going to open these little panels on the inside of the forearms, and then you can actually fold the hand inside and just close it up just like that. Then you can actually hinge the arm down back to a neutral position, go to the other side, and of course do the exact same thing. Just open up that panel, fold the hand inside, and close that up. Actually, as for this shoulder, you're not going to hinge it down to a neutral position. You're actually going to use this double jointed elbow and actually hinge this up, kind of fold it up like that, and they'll actually go back to the arms a little bit later in the transformation. We're going to move these out to the side for some more clearance. You're actually going to hinge the knees in, kind of point them towards each other like that. Then you can actually fold these panels out like that, untab them from the inside of the legs. As you can see, there is a tab there, and there's a slot on the inside of the leg. Then you're actually going to get the heel spurs, fold these out for some added clearance like that, fold them out. Then you're actually going to get the thrusters, hinge these forward as well. Same thing with these other ones, fold them forward. Then you're actually going to bend at the toe, and the foot is just going to fold inside using that hinge, and of course just kind of collapse inside there like that. So just fold this inside the leg. Same thing for the other side, just fold the foot in like that. And as you can see, of course, there is a small slot right there, and there is a tab right there. That is just going to tab into place just like that. And there we go. Sometimes it can be a bit tricky. There we go. And do the same thing on the other side, just tab that in. Then we can actually go back to the arms and the chest. We're actually going to open up the chest like that, just kind of pry this open. There we go. As you can see how this is tabbed in places, there is two tabs there and slots there. There's also a tab and a slot there, and that's how that's going to tab into place for the tank mode. Then you're actually going to use these two tabs in the middle of the chest, pretty much on the inside of the chest. You're actually going to tab those into those two slots on the underside of this arm and shoulder. And that's just going to align up like that and into place. Then we can actually flip to the underside. You're going to get this entire kind of spike section on the back of the figure. Hinge this out, and of course bring this flap out as well. Rotate this around. You can actually collapse that down like that. You're actually going to get the other arm, hinge this in. There is a tab pretty much in the armpit or underneath the arm. There is a slot right there. That's just going to tab into place like that. There is two slots and two tabs pretty much where the butt region is of the figure. And all of that is just going to tab into place like that. Then you're actually going to get the legs, just fold all these up using that knee bend, and there is quite a few tabs and slots. As you can see, there is a tab there, a slot there, there's a tab there, and a slot there, and quite a few more. I can typically get it mostly pretty flush. There might be a few gaps here and there. Probably after the transformation, I might go off cam and try and make things a bit more smooth and compact, but for the most part, I'll probably be able to do it pretty good. So just tab all this in nice and securely and good. Just tab all this into place. Same thing for the other leg. Just get all those tabs and slots combined like that. Nice and compact. And that is it for the transformation, but of course the tank mode is obviously not complete yet. You can actually bring in the really cool kind of fusion cannon from earlier and that same post and port system. Combine that there. And that is pretty much it for transformation for Megatron. Let's now take a look at the details. Here we have Megatron in his tank mode. Let's take a look at the details. Starting at the very front, we have some really nice glossy black for this entire front barrel section here with some really nice sculpt work. I do like all these canisters at the front section or the tip of the barrel. And if you don't know, this is ballistic piece compatible. I do like the sculpt work, and the glossy black is nice, but in comparison to the rest of the tank, it does look rather boring and unfinished. You can see there's a lot of details on this tank mode or the rest of the tank, like the body of the tank. So maybe some silver or gunmetal gray would have made a huge difference. I do like this entire kind of front laser section here, which it does appear, I could be wrong, it actually does appear this is ballistic piece compatible as well. Unfortunately, it's made of that kind of unfinished gray, so maybe some silver or maybe some gunmetal gray would have been a nice touch there as well. I just like the red with the really cool kind of venting detailing. There's this entire front spike section done in dark gray. I do love the kind of illuminating dark energon purple with these front sections here. There's actually some more at the back. They probably should have used more of that effect. I think they definitely did more on Barricade. I do have to say, probably of the two Decepticon alt modes so far, I think probably Barricade is winning because there's a lot more paint apps and it just looks a lot cooler. There's several areas on this tank mode that I do not like because it just seems really unfinished and kind of cheap. I can actually point them out, like the thrusters. I do really like the sculpt work, but definitely could have used some more paint apps, like some silver, maybe some more of that purple. It just looks a bit kind of boring to me. I don't know, maybe I could just be a bit too picky. I really don't know, but I do love these huge spikes at the back with a really cool illuminating purple. And you might see a few hollow spaces here and there because unfortunately, at least on my copy anyway, there's a bit of a tolerance problem with the tabs and slots because there's quite a few panels. This is pretty much the entire leg forming the side of the tank, for both sides. And they don't always really want to stay tabbed in. As you can actually see, there's a gap there. You can actually see the tab. That could really just be a my copy type thing. Maybe other copies, will actually tab together a bit better. I really don't know. So if you do see those hollow spaces, of course, that's not really just, an every copy type thing. It's really just kind of the tolerances I've actually had to deal with, but not the biggest complaint in the world. Overall, it's a pretty fun tank. As for accessory storage, of course, he does have the entire, front form. Cannon forms, of course, the entire barrel or turret for the tank mode. And if you are wondering, unfortunately, the entire turret is pretty much locked into place. It does not have any motion, no 360 rotation, which I did know before purchasing this figure or this transforming into this tank mode. As for his other accessories, of course, is the huge mace, which doesn't have the best storage, but you do have to kind of cut some slack, especially with an accessory this size and this shape. It's a lot easier to store this barrel because it's actually a very pivotal part of the tank, so that's pretty easy. But this is a really huge weapon in a really odd shape, so really the best you can do is store on the top like that using that post-import system. It's okay. I probably will never use the storage at all if I ever display this figure in the tank mode, for fun. Typically, most of my figures, I display them in the robot mode anyway, but if I'm ever going to display it in this mode, I'll probably leave it off to the side because it does look rather ridiculous. Again, I cut some slack because it's a pretty odd shaped accessory and not easy to store pretty much on any figure. But that's pretty much it for accessory storage. So let's now get down to some alt mode comparisons. Here he is with Cliff Jumper. I think they look pretty cool side by side. And here he is with Barricade, the other Decepticon from the Gamer Edition subline. I think probably as far as alt modes go, I probably do like a Barricade more. I think quite a few people actually did like with Barricade. I think they probably liked his alt mode more than his robot. I actually really do like this mode. It's actually quite big for a deluxe class figure. Do keep this in mind. This is a deluxe, this is a Voyager. They're pretty much almost the same size. I think one thing that's really winning with this figure over Megatron is the amount of paint apps and details. Yes, there is a bit of gray here and there, but there's whole patches and chunks on the tank that are just really that boring dark gray, so they really should have used more of that metallic purple, that silver. They have a lot on this car here, and it looks a lot better in my opinion. But now for one final comparison, here he is with his arch nemesis Optimus Prime. I think they look pretty cool side by side. And that is pretty much it for comparisons and this mode. Let's now get down to reverse transformation. So what you want to do is just remove this entire front turret or barrel section here. How the stores or tabs together, of course, there's that post and import system. Just put that off to the side. Now you're actually going to untab the entire side of the tank or the leg from this front section here. So of course there's a tab on the inside and a slot right there. Do the exact same thing on the other side. Just disconnect it and hinge this back. Of course, we're going to fold this back here. And they're actually going to rotate at the top of the leg or the knee region. Rotate these forward. We're actually going to focus on the legs for now. So what you want to do is actually hinge this up, and you're actually going to get the foot and flip this forward like that. Then you can actually get the toe, hinge it out, and then you're actually going to get this entire main thruster here, hinge this back, and then you can actually get the smaller one and hinge this over the top like that. And then you can actually tab this panel in, and there we have one leg all done. Do the exact same thing on the other side. Of course, just hinge the foot out of there like that. Get the toe, flip that forward. Then you can actually get this entire big thruster, fold that in, get the other one, fold it over, and then just tab that into place like that. There we have the legs all done. Then we can actually go back here, focus on the other arm. You can actually untab this from the back. It's actually quite secure. And then you're going to hinge this entire section forward like that. Let me just quickly kind of straighten him up and kind of plant him down like that. You're going to then untab the other arm and the form like that, hinge this out, and then of course hinge it back into place like that. Then you can actually get this entire back panel here, rotate this entire spike piece around. It can be a bit tricky. There we go, rotate around, and then hinge this section down. And then you're actually going to fold this section back up. As you can see, there is 2 slots there and 2 tabs there. That's just going to tab into place just like that. Then what you want to do is actually go to the chest, this entire section here, fold this entire section up. There is 2 slots and 2 tabs, and just tab that into place. And then let me just quickly kind of place the figure, kind of straighten up his legs, get him a bit more stable. Let me raise the camera up so you can see what I'm doing. There we go. You're actually going to get this little flap here, fold that down. Then you can bring the arms down. into a neutral position. You can actually open up these little panels in the forms and then fold the hand out. Sometimes you gotta get your nail, just pick that out of there, close that up. Same thing on the other side, just open up this panel inside the form and then get the hands, fold this out, and then close that up. And there we have the reverse transformation for Megatron. Let's now get down to the final thoughts. Now for the final thoughts for the Transformers Studio Series Gamer Edition 04 Voyager class Megatron. I think overall this is a really good figure. Starting in the tank mode, I do love the oval shape that actually went for this tank. I do love the huge thrusters at the bottom of the tank. Really nice sculpt work, but desperately needs some more paint, like maybe some silver, some gunmetal gray. Actually on the inside of the thruster would have been really cool, maybe if they actually had some of that really cool kind of illuminating dark energon purple effect, but unfortunately they're really just gray. It's quite boring. But as for the rest of the tank, I do love all the silver, the gunmetal gray, the black, the layers of panels, the really cool spikes. It's just very menacing. And there's actually quite a few areas on the tank that are mostly present from the robot mode, of course. As you can obviously tell, most of the details from this mode you can definitely see present from the other one, but there's some really cool kind of illuminating sort of dark energon purple effect. They kind of did the same effect with Bumblebee, Cliffjumper, and Optimus, the previous Autobots, of course. With those figures, it was more of an orangish red. This time it's actually a really nice dark energon purple. I think they probably should have done it more, because they did more of that gimmick or feature on the Autobots than this Decepticon here. I think it would look probably a lot cooler if they did more on this figure, but I do love the entire barrel. Of course, it actually acts as his fusion cannon in the remote mode. Speaking of the fusion cannon, I do like it. It's really well sculpted. I do like the glossy black, but it probably could have had more to it. More, panels, more paps, more details. Again, I do like the sculpt work. Just if you do look at the cannon or the blaster in comparison to the figure, it is quite bland and unfinished. I think probably maybe they ran out of money, or maybe the budget, or maybe they just wanted to have it more simplistic. I do have a theory, maybe they wanted to do kind of a G1 reference, because if you do look, at the G1 show or any G1 Megatron figure, typically his fusion cannon is very simple. It's really just black. That's all it is. Even in the G1 cartoon, it was pretty much just black. There was not much to it. But if you do look, at maybe, the last time Megatron, his fusion cannon has a ton of details, and it's kind of like this. The actual figure itself is very well detailed. Of course, it's based off the War for Cybertron video game. They were very war-torn, battle-ready, tons of spikes and details. So if you do look at the fusion cannon, and then you look at the figure, it is quite boring and kind of unfinished in comparison. I'm not sure if they were trying to do somewhat like of a G1 reference or something to maybe make it resemble his G1 cannon, for the G1 Megatron design, or they could have just ran out of money and were trying to be cheap. I really don't know. But overall, I think it's a pretty cool tank mode. Definitely the robot mode is my more favorite of the two modes, but I'm actually kind of glad we have a more futuristic tank finally, because I have been kind of tired of the typical Earth-based or Earth mode tank. It's been a bit repetitive and boring, so I do like the more futuristic look. I do think there's a few areas like the thrusters, as I mentioned before, probably could have used some more paint. The entire tank barrel or the blaster, again, could have used some more stuff to it just to make it a bit more interesting. As for transformation, I actually think it's pretty fun. It is a bit intricate and complex. The first time around, if you do first get in hand, it might be a bit, scary if you do look at the instructions. I think it's quite a few steps. I think it's over 20, like 25 or something. But I would say after the first 5 times using the instructions, you'll get it down pretty easy. As for the robot mode, I actually really do like it. He looks so menacing, so scary. Love the head sculpt, really cool silver, red for the eyes. I do love the kind of glowing dark energon purple effect they actually did for the chest. I do love all the layers of panels, spikes, and angles. It's just such a cool design. I do think they probably should have taken the same approach that they did with this figure that they also did with Optimus. Optimus, if you do look at that Voyager class figure, he's a lot more beefy and bulky. He's actually quite big and chunky, and that's pretty much how they were in the video game. I didn't ever really play that video game that much, but I did watch the gameplay of them. I did watch the game occasionally. I played the game occasionally off and on. But, the proportions always really didn't make the most sense with those designs and those characters. They were very, big and beefy. Their heads looked kind of small, but their arms and the limbs were really chunky and big because they were very war-torn and battle-ready. And I actually thought that looked really cool on Optimus. Yes, people have complained about his proportions in the past. That's a valid complaint. But I think that's pretty much on purpose by Hasbro. But what I'm trying to get to say is pretty much I think they probably should have done that same thing that they did with Optimus with this figure. Because if you do look at Optimus and Megatron side by side, Megatron actually does look a tad bit puny. So I think they probably articulation made his arms and his legs a bit more beefy and bulky. I know they didn't want to make the tank, too humongous, because the legs actually kind of form the main portion or like the side portions of the tank. So I do somewhat understand, they do have some limitations, but if you do compare Optimus to Megatron, it looks a bit odd, because if you do, watch pretty much any TV show, any Transformers TV show, Armada, Prime, the movies, typically Megatron is bigger than Optimus, and with this toy, form, the Optimus and Megatron, Optimus is actually bigger, so scaling wise, I don't think it works. As for articulation, there has been a huge talk on the Transformers community about this figure. So interesting enough, his knee bend is very, very limited. He can only pretty much bend his knee or hinge his leg back very, very little. It's pretty much nothing, non-existent, especially if you do compare it to a deluxe, a leader. Even I think a core class has more, which, that being said, core class joints are, ball joints, and they very little transform. They have very few steps, but I think you do get my point. So interesting, if you do look at the back of the legs, if you don't already know, there's actually these little kind of tabs or so little pieces of plastic, and they're actually pretty much at the back of the knee, and whenever you bend the knee, they pretty much are there to block it from going further. And you do not use them in the transformation at all. That I know of. I've watched quite a few reviews on this guy. As I mentioned before, I've looked at the instructions countless of times. I've already transformed this guy about, 4 or 5 times, maybe 6 times, and I do not see any mention or use of that tab. They don't really go anywhere. If you do look when you're transforming it, the tabs or those pieces of plastic really don't align with anything else. So I'm not really sure why they're there. I have seen a few people actually clip them off, like literally remove them from the figure by cutting them off. You could by all means do that. I typically really don't like to break or modify my toys, but if you like doing that, if you're okay with it, of course, by all means, you will have a much better range of motion. I do hope maybe someday we'll get an answer. Maybe whenever Hasbro does another one of those like Q&A events, or maybe at PulseCon, we could like ask in the chat like, hey, why are those pieces there? Or maybe they'll hear our complaints, because we do, say this type of stuff, in reviews and on social media, so maybe Hasbro will see them and maybe they'll actually answer this question, because it is a bit weird. I wasn't expecting to see that. I did know about this, problem or this thing before I actually got in hand. I purchased this a long time ago when the pre-orders were actually, first posted, but I think over a week or two ago, I did learn about this, when I did keep it on pre-order. I didn't like cancel the figure or anything, and I don't recommend to do that either. Yes, it is quite limited with the leg articulation, but it's not really the biggest deal in the world. As for the other areas of articulation, I think it's overall pretty standard for a Voyager class figure. The arms, the rest of the legs, minus the knee, I would say are exactly what to expect. Unfortunately, he really doesn't have an ankle pivot. The foot can pivot out, but that really doesn't do much, considering the angle it pivots at. The foot, really doesn't pivot at a slant for you to actually use it in a pose. The reason why it actually hinges out is a part of transformation, so not really an existing useful ankle pivot, but I guess he technically does have one. Unfortunately, he doesn't have a wrist rotation. That's mostly due to transformation, but I do think they probably could have worked one in. I know you fold in the hands a part of transformation. Typically, most deluxes do that, so I'll give a pass on that, but this isn't a deluxe. This is a Voyager, so I definitely think they probably could have done both of those, to be able to fold in the hand and also have a wrist rotation at the same time, because we've definitely seen it in the past countless of times. We've even seen them do that with leaders. I'm actually pretty sure the leader Blitzwing, he does have a wrist rotation, but he also does fold in his hand. So I do think it's completely possible for them to do it. As for accessories, I already did cover the cannon. He also does come with this really cool, awesome battle mace or kind of flail, which was definitely one of the things I was looking forward to the most with this figure. I actually think it looks really cool. Interesting enough, it's actually 2 separate pieces. I'm not really sure why it is. It does come packaged separately. You do have to tab the entire spike piece, to the handle. Maybe they just wanted to ship it that way because they didn't want it to snap or break. I really don't know. They have done it in the past, the Voyager Optimus, you can separate all those pieces, the 2 handle pieces and the battle axe or the blade piece itself, so I'm not really sure why. Maybe it'll be for some future thing, or they just wanted to do it for some reason. I do like the mace. It's really cool, definitely the better accessory of the 2, but unfortunately the figure can only hold the mace at the pretty much bottom of the handle, so it looks a bit odd to me. I think probably what they should have done with this mace, they should have done the same thing like the axe with Optimus. So if you don't know, with Optimus, you could actually, pretty much separate the axe in 3 pieces. There's 2 handles and the blade. So you can actually put his hand or his arm, in between the handles. So it actually looks like he's kind of holding it, at the, I would say, mid portion of the entire pole or handle. So it looks a bit better, He's actually not holding it from the very bottom of the axe. I actually really don't like that look. If you like the look of Megatron holding the entire mace or weapon from the bottom of the handle, that's good. I just think it looks a bit weird for him to hold at the bottom. It just looks a bit goofy. So since, this axe or this mace is, in separate pieces, you can actually separate in 2. I think they probably should have added an area where you can actually, put his hand in between the spike piece and the handle piece, so it actually looks like he's holding it kind of in the middle of the mace. I think that would probably look better. Hopefully you understand what I mean. I think if you do have Optimus, you probably understand what I mean. So, I just think, considering they're already 2 separate pieces, they definitely could have done that. If this was one solid piece, I probably wouldn't, have said this, but since it's already 2 separate pieces, all they really need to do is kind of sculpt in a small area, or add a small area where you could actually slide the hand in there, and then, add the spike piece, so it actually looks like Megatron sort of holding the entire mace and the middle of the handle, because it just looks a bit odd, him holding it at the bottom. But overall, I think it's a very good figure. Is it better, than the original Warfare Saboteur Megatron when the game first came out? Again, I really can't say. I never owned that figure. I do think, from afar, from what I've seen through reviews and in hand occasionally, it does look like that figure is pretty good. I think this probably is the superior in many ways. I think the mace accessory is better, because I'm actually pretty sure the original never even came with the mace. I think it only came with that blaster, which definitely is the better blaster of the 2, but this does come with 2 accessories. I'm pretty sure that figure only came with 1. I think this is probably a bigger figure. That being said, as of size, as I mentioned before, just a Voyager class in general, not even comparing to Optimus, as I mentioned before, I did compare him to Optimus. He is smaller than Optimus, which typically is a bit odd to see, because Megatron is usually bigger than Optimus, but just as a Voyager, I think he should be bigger. I actually did have that concern a while ago when they actually first did that kind of pipeline reveal, when they showed it off in hand. I was like, wow, that is pretty small for a Voyager. So at that time, I was really hoping, okay, I hope I'm wrong. Hopefully it's bigger in hand. But unfortunately, that is not the case. I wouldn't say, it's like deluxe class size, but I would say for a Voyager, it definitely could be bigger. But overall, I do highly still recommend this figure. Is it, the best of the Gamer Edition figures? No, it's probably the second best. Optimus is definitely the better figure of the 2, but I still think it's a good one. If you do have the original, would I say this is a must-buy? I guess that's really for you to decide, because again, I don't have that figure, so I really don't know how much, what's better, which figure is better, which one's worse. If you do have that figure, I would say maybe you could still give this a chance, like maybe if it's on clearance someday, because, this is a mainline figure, so maybe if you want to hold off for now, and maybe if it's on sale for like half off, you could get that. I think that would be a really good idea. But if you don't own any, use or version of this design, I would say get it. I think it's a really good figure. It's definitely, the more interesting of the 2 most recent Gamer Edition figures. Cliffjumper, he is just a repaint retool, so definitely the more exciting and interesting figure of the 2. I would say don't let the other reviews scare you, because I've watched quite a few, and a lot of people are very hard and negative on this figure, which is completely within their right. They have their own opinion. I think if you just, keep it aside, a lot of people are comparing it to the older version, and every aspect, like, they are saying every, aspect of this figure has to be an improvement. It has to be pretty much 1,000 times better than that older version. I do think it should be better, but if you do look at it on its own, not comparing it to that older version, I think it's still a very fun and enjoyable figure. I do hope you enjoyed this review. Please leave all your thoughts on this figure in the comment section below, and I'll see you next time.